What's going on, Spurs fans? I have another awesome video for y'all. Today, I have our guests, Rudy Campos Jr. and Carolina Teague from San Antonio's newest sports radio show, The Sports Time on 9:30 a.m. The Answer. How's it going, guys?
What's up? What's up? Going good. Going good. Early morning here.
It's going really good. Just another day, another dollar.
True. I'm so glad to have y'all today. I was super excited when y'all said yes to come on. Following y'all's content, y'all, everything y'all have been doing for like the last couple of years, y'all are kind of in a position that I'd love to be in, sometime in the near future. But let's just go ahead and hop right into it. The NBA Finals last night was Game 3. Not the San Antonio Spurs, the Los Angeles Lakers had an opportunity to go up 3-1, and we obviously know they did not. It is now 2-1, and they lost to a shorthanded Miami Heat team. And, what are y'all thoughts of the finals? Are y'all watching the games? Are y'all interested in the series? Or is it something y'all haven't even, dived into yet?
We've dove into the series. Yeah, we've dove into the series. And on Sunday, which was yesterday, we did our show. And I made a bold prediction that the Lakers and the Heat would go 4-0. And I was really in over my head. Obviously, I was wrong. And the Heat came back. Jimmy Butler had a triple-double yesterday evening. So, I mean, this could potentially be a good series. But I think it sounds more feasible with Rudy's prediction, a gentleman's sweep. It would be 4-1. That's what I think.
Yeah, I called the 4. I mean, I was saying 4-1. Originally, I said it was Heat and 6. I took the Miami Heat just because of you've got a blue collar team. It's, you got one star, but it's not a mega star. So it reminded me of the days of when, Rip Hamilton, Chauncey Billups won their title.
Yeah.
Even that early Heat team with Dwayne Wade and Shaq, just kind of a team that works together and meshes well. Getting that kind of an upset in the NBA Finals going. I felt the same way, but after seeing Bam go down and Dragic go down, I thought, you know what? It's going to be Lakers in 5. I still stick with the gentleman's sweep. But the interest in the actual finals, I turned it on for the first quarter. In Game 1, I turned it off and hadn't really turned it back on since last night. It just didn't really look like a finals that I'd be interested in until last night. But I think what I ended up seeing and what kind of sparked my interest was that fourth quarter, knowing that this Heat team has a little bit more confidence than they did in the first 2 games, and seeing the body language on the Lakers really concerns me as someone who's following basketball. If I'm a Laker fan, I'm a little bit concerned after seeing that.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Jimmy say, they're in trouble. I don't know if y'all saw that, but he said, they're in trouble. Yeah. And I think the Lakers might be in trouble. I think everybody, excluding maybe LeBron James and Marcus Morris, didn't show up last night. And even LeBron James, to a certain extent, like he had many opportunities to stay glued to Jimmy Butler. A screen came and he let KCP switch, and Jimmy had, got pretty much whatever he wanted all night long. And you're right, the body language didn't look good from the Lakers. I would be worried if I was a Lakers fan. So now that I know y'all are watching the game, we know that the Lakers are ahead 2-1, and y'all think that the Lakers will still win this series. But do you think there's even like a small chance that the Miami Heat can crawl back into the series, maybe surprise everybody if Bam and Dragic return this next game? Because I know that they weren't there for Game 3. They weren't there for Game 2, most of it at least. If they come back by Game 4, because there were some rumors they might be coming back for Game 3, but they may be available for Game 4. Do either of y'all see them, making this a series or maybe even winning it?
Absolutely. There's always definitely a chance that any team can come back and win a series. I think what stands out to me the most about the errors that were made last night was that Anthony Davis had a bad game. So that was, to me, is the thing that stood out the most. If he continues to play poorly like he did last night, then the Miami Heat can absolutely take advantage of that and come out on top. I mean, he committed 4 turnovers and he was minus 15 or minus 13, and then he went to the bench. I feel like if he continues to play that poorly, then the Miami Heat can definitely come back. And I feel like there's nobody on the floor that wants a championship more than Jimmy Butler right now. And he plays his heart out every single game. So if he continues to play the way that he's playing, just phenomenal, and Anthony Davis doesn't adjust, then there is definitely a possibility they could come back. I mean, I would never say never.
Yeah, and Rudy Tomjanovich said it best. Don't never underestimate the heart of a champion. And this Heat's team definitely has that heart. I mean, what we saw the first two games was the Lakers bullying an undersized and, an inexperienced Miami Heat's team. What we saw last night was two words: Miles Leonard. He came in for the Heat and he wasn't scared. He was bullying around Dwight Howard. He wasn't really giving a care about anything else. Anthony Davis had a bad game. And what the Heat did last night was bully the Lakers back. And that's where I said that body language for the Lakers is a concerning one, because it felt like they didn't know what hit them. They didn't know what was going on. They were the ones being the bullies. And then all of a sudden the Heat turned around and started bullying them back. So I want to say, out of 100% chance of who's going to win this series, I'm saying it's still about 89, 90% that the Lakers will win this series. But if we see the same Heat team pull off the same kind of win that they did last night, it's going to go like 55, 60%. It's anybody's series after this game 4 if they tie it up. And honestly, it's all momentum Miami. If they do tie this up, I think they have a little bit more of an edge on the Lakers, just because, like I said, that body language is so concerning to me.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've seen with this Miami Heat team throughout the entire postseason is they really like each other. They gel with each other. They have great chemistry. They have each other's back. They're picking people up the second they fall. They're cheering on the bench, whether they play. I mean, like y'all said, Myers Leonard came in last night, and Kelly Olynyk to a certain extent as well. But Myers Leonard is a guy who I think had played 4 times in the postseason up to that point. And he's next man out mentality. He was ready to play. He wasn't afraid of anything. And I think that's kind of the mindset of every single one of those Miami Heat players. I mean, Tyler Hero, he was awful for most of that game. And by the end of it, he made a layup and one, and he had, he did the snarl. He was feeling himself. And I think that whole Miami Heat team has that mentality. I don't think they're going to give up. I really think there's a good chance they could make this a series. I still think the Lakers are probably going to win this one. I would put the odds somewhere between like 80, 90%. But I think the Miami Heat are not ready to give up, regardless of if Bam or Dragic come back. And this kind of leads to my next question. I heard y'all on the last show that I heard of y'all that was on the podcast y'all did, talking a little bit about LeBron James. If LeBron James wins this series, does it do anything to move the needle in that Jordan versus LeBron argument? I don't think it does. It's great if he wins the title. I'm not really cheering for either team. I'm a big LeBron fan. I also really like how the Heat have built this team, but I don't think it does much to move the needle. What do y'all think about
that? I'll say this as much. It doesn't move the needle for me. And, I think Carolina, I think it was Carolina made a point or a statement one time that said LeBron's really not even in her top 5. For me, LeBron is one of the greatest basketball players of all time. I will admit that. But when you talk about greatest, like absolute greatest of all time, he's not there. He will never be there. He's the greatest player of his era. And that's where it stands out. You look at Mike, you look at LeBron, you look at Jabbar, you look at guys like that, different eras of basketball. This era of basketball is way easier to be great in than it was back in the 80s and the 90s era. Back then, if you got breathed on, if you got knocked to the ground, it was a common foul. I mean, it was, you had to earn your points back in the day. This day and age, I mean, a little fingernail tap and you're already at the free throw line. I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous, but this is the way that the NBA wants to go, because they've got to cater to the younger crowd, and we all get that. So it's a different era of basketball. Does it make LeBron that much closer to Jordan? Honestly, he's not even that close to begin with. And I know I've heard the debate. Jordan had Pippen, so LeBron had to go, with Bosh and wait and get his titles. Look at that right there. Jordan was drafted by the Bulls. The Bulls got Scottie Pippen through the draft. This was all one keyword, and it was all the same thing. It's draft. LeBron was drafted by the Cavaliers. He had to join other players to get his first title. I mean, so the debate kind of just stops right there for me.
For me, I also feel like he's not in my top 5, but that's not, and me trying to be offensive in any type of way. When I have my personal top 5, I'm looking at everybody from a totality. from when the NBA first started to today's date. And I give respect to the old heads just out of, just a respect thing. You got Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Larry Bird, Hakeem Olajuwon is up there for me, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and then you have LeBron James. And the players that I mentioned before, a majority of them have more titles than LeBron James. But then again, we can also have an old school mentality as well. I mean, LeBron James is doing phenomenal for the era that he's in. I do think he's the greatest of this era as well. But as far as being able to touch Michael Jordan, it depends on what stats you're looking at. People can pull stats from any direction in any way they want to, and you can say LeBron is the greatest when you look at it from this stat sheet, or Michael's the greatest when you look at it from this stat sheet. What I do think is that if he wins this 4th championship, then at that point, my question is, can he catch up to Michael Jordan and get 6 rings by the time he retires? Because I feel like LeBron still has a few more good years left in him, maybe about 3 or 4 more years, just as a player. And if he's able to get 2 more rings after this year, then he's in that conversation. How many, is he up there with Michael Jordan because they have the same amount of rings? And it's a possibility just based off of, the team that he has with the Lakers, that he could take it there. So that's kind of where I'm at as far as where LeBron James measures up to Michael Jordan, is by the time his career is over, is he going to have as many rings as Michael Jordan? And right now with the Lakers team that he has, that's a huge possibility.
If the Lakers don't win this title, I'm sorry, no, if the Lakers don't win this title, let me ask both of you this. Is the GOAT talk over? If Miami comes back and beats LA, there's no more GOAT talk because now he's looking at what, 3-7 in the finals?
Yeah. For me, I'll say this much. I don't think LeBron ever catches Michael Jordan in the GOAT conversation. If he wins this title, I don't think it moves the needle. I don't think it makes us go, oh, well, there's not going to be any Jordan fans who go, oh, well, LeBron has a 4th title now. Let me hop on to the LeBron train. That's not happening. And if he loses, I think it does kind of hurt his legacy a little bit, because I think this Miami Heat team is perceived as one that's more a team unit than like superstar, mega star driven. But at the end of the day, I think, LeBron, for me, I try to separate players into different categories, right? So you can say greatest of all time. And for me, he's never going to catch Jordan, because Jordan has Defensive Player of the Year. He's pretty much all defensive team every single year of his career, all NBA first team most years of his career. He has more MVPs, he has more titles. I don't think LeBron catches them. And I think the NBA this year was missing a lot of good teams. We saw the Warriors, they were injured all year. The Brooklyn Nets, a team who I think could legitimately compete for a title, they were injured this year. And LeBron's team, and I'm not trying to make excuses for LeBron, because LeBron is the best player on the best team in the Western Conference. But I think this may be one of his worst finals teams in his career. I don't think it's worse than the 2007 finals team where the Spurs swept him, 4-0 pretty easily. That wasn't even any competition really there. But, he has Anthony Davis, probably the best teammate he's ever played with. But the rest of the guys just don't really do much for me. You got a lot of guys who are past their prime, some young players who are okay, but, not great. And we saw that last night. They didn't really show up. I think people outside of LeBron and Morris shot like 23% from the field. That's awful. You're not going to win that way, even if you're playing a shorthanded Miami Heat team. But I'll let Carolina.
He had to do.
Completely go off on a tangent there.
Yeah, and that's what the Heat had to do, was they had to allow, basically it's kind of the old effect, allow Jordan to get his points but shut everybody down. And that's kind of what they did. They attacked everybody. They got into scoring. They didn't have to actually play into LeBron's, tactics to where, hey, let's double team him. Let's do this. Let's double team Anthony Davis. No, let's just square up. Let's body him up. Miles Leonard came in, bodied up Anthony Davis. He bodied up Howard, kept them off the boards. They did the little things that they had to do to win this game big. And it affected the Lakers because, you're seeing guys like Danny Green throw up Hail Marys like he did even back in San Antonio days. You saw a guy like Alex Caruso not having a good game. Rondo was the biggest factor in the first 2 games for the Lakers. Screw Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Rajon Rondo was the reason why the Lakers actually were coming out on top of the first 2 games. But you shut him down last night. You got in his face. You had guys like J.R. Smith. I mean, the guy could barely see, basically. It's just a lot of stuff was going on with the other Lakers players, like you said. Allow LeBron to do his thing. He's going to bully you. Great. Get your 2 points, whatever. We're going to shut you down the other end, too. You're going to get your points at the other end, but we're also going to shut down the other guys.
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to actually talk about LeBron just for a little bit more. So I'm kind of the mindset we've seen pretty much in any sport ever throughout the history of sports. Athletes are constantly getting stronger, faster. They jump higher, whatever. They're always getting better. And I hear this argument a lot, and y'all brought it up last time as well on your podcast, was that, or your show rather, that Jordan played with garbage men and mailmen and
plumbers.
And that's just not the case. Now, are they as good of athletes as today's players are? Maybe not, but I don't think you can say, oh, well, we're going to take LeBron James, you put him in that era, oh, he would dominate. Or you take Jordan and you put him in this era, maybe he's not better. I don't think that's fair because, again, you always see athletes getting better. I think you have to judge players by their standard, because I think a lot of people, again, like with a guy like Bill Russell, oh, well, there were 9 teams, the players weren't so good. Well, they can't help that. That's just the era they're playing in. And even though, we can say, oh, the athletes weren't better. In Jordan's era, you had less rules rather that were geared towards an offensive driven game. You could hand check players, you could, hard fouls. Not every single hard foul was a technical foul. They really let those guys scrap. And I think that the game was obviously way more physical. So I think we can argue all day about, oh, well, can somebody be good in this era or somebody's good in that era? But I think regardless of what you think about either era, I think both players are excellent, but I would still give Jordan the edge there. And I don't know what y'all think about that in terms of, which era was better. I don't like really to compare eras like that because, the game evolves. It's constantly evolving. Things are always changing. And really, like I said, the league has just made it such an offensive driven league.
Mm-hmm. Here's the thing about, comparing eras. To me, it really, hypothetical situations, they bother me because it's like, we're never going to know. We could argue all day long. They're good talking points. We can argue all day long about if we put this person here and we put this person here, is this going to happen? And we could answer those questions. But the reality is we're never going to know because this is not the reality. You know what I mean? So when we're comparing eras, that's why I like to say there's always a great player in each era, the greatest player. We know hands down the greatest player in the 90s was Michael Jordan. Everyone knows that. We know that the greatest players in the 2000s, well, it's kind of it was Kobe Bryant as a player, but teams, it was a toss-up between the Lakers and, the Spurs. They were always going at it, in my opinion. That's just my personal opinion. And then when we're looking at greatest players in this era, it's LeBron James. And I feel like his era is coming to an end and there's going to be another great player. Who's it going to be? So I feel like comparing these hypothetical situations, they're fun ideas to flirt with, but you're going to have your bronzexuals who are always going to say LeBron is the GOAT. And then you're going to have your Jordanettes like me who are always going to say Jordan's the GOAT. So they're fun topics to play around with, but there's a great in all eras. And like you said, back to your point, the game is always evolving. So, and these players are evolving with the game. So we'll never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally true. The eras are different. Era basketballs are different. And, I mean, you could easily say, okay, you know how Jordan was. Jordan got manhandled by the bad boys and Piston. He was one moment, he's fighting with the Knicks, Charles Oakley, Patrick Ewing, John Starks. He fought his way to titles and he had to always evolve his game to become a better player to get through those obstacles. And that's kind of like the thing in the 80s and 90s. The Pistons were always trying to get to the finals, but those damn Celtics were in the way. So they had to keep evolving, keep being better, keep, making adjustments till finally they got over the hump. Same thing with Jordan. He had to get through those bad boys. He had to evolve. His entire team had to evolve to get through those bad boy years and get into the finals. I mean, the Lakers dominated the finals in the West all the time, but then you had teams like Portland coming in. Portland, with Clyde Drexler and Terry Porter having to fight their way to get into that final spot. So the involvement in that era was good. In this era, it just seems like it's not like that because you have the emergence of these super teams where guys are coming together and hey, you know what? We're going to have this super team, but we're also going to have, good teams and a couple of great teams, but we have a bunch of mediocre teams. So it's a little bit easier to get to the finals if you're stacked. A la, the Golden State Warriors for all those years, even though they did most of it to the draft, but adding KD, in that time sense, you've got the Lakers with AD, and LeBron, so and so, so and so. But what I always like to bring this up, you got three guys that we always talk about: Kobe, MJ, LeBron. Who is the greatest out of these guys here? I have a really good question because I cannot find the answer to this. Have y'all ever seen LeBron in a fight? Literally in a fight? Because I bring this up because I've always felt the league protects LeBron and or LeBron can't fight. He's scared. He's scared of everything. Why? Kobe and Chris Childs got into it. We all remember that fight. Lakers.
The 2-piece and a biscuit.
You want to talk about Jordan? Jordan say, "Oh, Jordan never fought." BS. Jordan Xavier McDaniels, Knicks and Bulls. You want to go another one? Jordan Reggie Miller, Indiana Pacers and the Bulls. When Reggie dang near choked out Jordan. Nobody has ever put. It's just like everybody's scared to come at LeBron, and I don't know if it's because it's like the NBA has him so protected in a quote unquote, and it's kind of weird, but a bubble, or is LeBron just not, I hate to say this and no disrespect, I love the guy, but is he not man enough to, get up and get into people's faces and stuff? And I think that's what drives me crazy is that if you're so much of the greatest player of all time, why don't you have these little incidences every now and then? I mean, he gets knocked to the ground, he gets up and he just kind of like puffs his chest and looks at you and walks away. I mean, he lets his other guys do the work for him. So this era of basketball, it just kind of proves again, this era of basketball is just soft. Kobe said it best, soft. It's soft.
I think it's just like, go ahead, Carolina.
Yeah, let me interrupt you real quick. Not you, no, sorry. I know you're the host and stuff.
Oh, good. No,
hold on, wait. I think there was super teams before, this era. There was definitely super teams. I don't like the fact that people say there wasn't super teams back in the day, because there was.
In what way? In what sense?
They
were all through the drafts.
I think.
Okay. I get what you're saying in that sense. Okay. Well, so Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, and James Worthy in the 80s, that was all drafts? I didn't know that.
Except Jabbar. Jabbar came from the Bucks, but Magic to the draft, Worthy to the draft, Byron Scott to the draft, AC Green to the draft.
Okay, so you're not saying super teams in a sense that there was no emergence of superstars, but everybody joined forces like Megatron is what you're saying in this
basically,
era.
In this era of basketball, everybody's like, oh, be my friend, play with me. Back then, it's like, you know what, we're going to draft the best player available.
Okay, I'm glad you gave me clarification on that because I was like, there was super teams, but I get what you're saying now. But they all merged together like Voltron in this era as well.
In this era, yeah.
Okay, now I get it. Okay, so hold on. Okay, so back to what you were saying about, what you had made a point about Michael Jordan and these errors and things like that, why he doesn't fight. LeBron, I don't think he's just a fighter. Maybe that's not the image that he wants to portray, because I feel like LeBron James, when he's looking at, people that look up to him, kids that look up to him, he's about to be in Space Jam and stuff. I don't think he wants to risk all his endorsements and all that stuff for getting into a fight. So I feel like that's probably why he doesn't fight. I'm sure LeBron is a fighter. He just probably doesn't fight because he, thinks about the bigger picture, his image, who he's trying to portray, his endorsements, the money that he has behind him. So I don't think that he's necessarily soft in that sense, because I don't recall ever seeing, did Tim Duncan ever get into a fist fight?
No, not really. He
had problems with KG,
but he doesn't react. Yeah, that's kind of.
But they did. LeBron's gotten into reactions too with players, but I don't think he's gotten into a fist fight. I just think some players, that's just not how they move on the court. Now, I like that you brought up Kobe Bryant and Chris Childs. That was like one of my favorite highlights of all time. I definitely think that just some players just ain't like that. I don't think he's soft in that sense, but some people, that's just not how they roll on the court, and that's what I think.
That's the West Side in me.
So I guess I to say, and
your West Side's coming out.
points about that, what we've been talking about is one, I don't really think LeBron is necessarily soft. I would ask this question. LeBron is 6'9", 285. How many guys are going to want to fight LeBron? I wouldn't want to fight LeBron if I was in the NBA. And I also think the NBA has enforced pretty severe fines for fighting, whether it be you're sitting out of games, whether you're losing a ton of money. And if you're LeBron, you're the best player on your team pretty much every single year, and you're the most important player on your team. You don't want to be sitting out of games. You leave your team vulnerable. We see how bad teams are once LeBron leaves. Cleveland was instantaneously bad once he left. The Miami Heat were bad once he left. I just don't think we can call LeBron soft. Now, I won't say he's like a tough guy enforcer. He's not that. And I think a lot of guys have different, sort of personalities. Tim Duncan, quiet. He's not going to bother you. Even if you're trying to get in his grill, he's just going to laugh it off and walk away. I think that's more of LeBron's style. But and another thing I wanted to bring up in terms of the super team thing is I think right now, and I could be wrong, I've only been watching basketball for 15, 20 years. I try to do my homework, watch old games, do some research. But I think right now we've seen, and I hate to say this because I love this era of basketball, just the players, but I think we've seen a gross incompetence from a ton of front offices. You've got a market like New York with the Knicks. They should have free agents flooding there. They should have great team every year. They're awful every single year. The same can be said for the Bulls. They can't draft well. Even the Cavs couldn't draft well around LeBron. And I just, from the second he was there, pretty much, the Cleveland Cavaliers were a top-tier Eastern Conference team. They never got, a top pick. And if you can't draft well and you have to luck into somebody like LeBron James to save your franchise, you're not going to be like the Spurs where you have the 29th, 28th pick, but you find a gem. The Cavs consistently drafted poorly when he was there, and they surrounded him with guys like Zydrunas Ilgauskas, Mo Williams, past his prime Shaq, past his prime Ben Wallace. I don't really blame LeBron for leaving, but at the same time, I understand what you mean, like building the team. But I think we got to put blame where blame is due on the front offices, because we see a lot of terrible front offices. Not that there haven't been in the past, but I think right now we see a lot of front offices awful. They're awful at what they do. And I hate to say that because I've never been in their position, but really they have terrible.
No, call it for what it is. Some organizations are awful in doing what they do. And, like the Bulls are trying to make a change. They got Arturas, I cannot pronounce his name for the life of me, Carniçovas. He did well with the Nuggets. So they're trying to make those little changes. But sometimes the change is way more than just making those small, changes in the vice presidency. Sometimes the change is way at the top. I mean, the perfect example is my favorite football team, the Bears. The Tim Jennings and all them at the top, George McCaskey. It's them, and we all know that, but they are never going to fire themselves. But Stephen A. Smith, I listen to his interviews all the time. Stephen A. Smith said it the best. Sometimes organizations and sometimes team organizations, or just in general, wherever you work at, just organizations, they hire the people that they're friends with. They hire the people that they get along with. They hire the people that are their buddies and they go to golf with them, but they don't hire the people that will bring them success. And that's the difference between a good organization and a good boss and a bad boss. So you see the organizations that are mostly successful with these drafts and these trades and these picks, they put the people around them that they know are going to be the most successful and not necessarily their friends. And I feel like that's just in general with business management. When you see these teams, they can't get it together at the top, it's because they won't let the people go that are their good friends. And that's just kind of how I see it. So, it's not, and I see why the players want to leave, because who wants to deal with that? So, I mean, I understand the mentality of why they do want to leave these teams.
But, I can counteract that with this right here. This is something that a lot of people, and I didn't realize it as well. The reason being that a lot of these teams like the Knicks and stuff is because, yes, it's ownership. And the reason why it's ownership is because of the damn luxury tax these days. A lot of people don't want to overpay for players or pay players because they don't want to be in that luxury tax spot. Prime example are the San Antonio Spurs. I mean, we've got, can we get a Giannis Antetokounmpo in San Antonio? Probably not. But if you had a non-luxury tax penalty where you could offer a huge max deal to Giannis, it'll at least make him think about it. But these teams like the Spurs, they can't offer that because it's not so much it's a small market, it's because our owners don't want to pay that extra 20, 30, 40 million dollars in penalties offering a player like that kind of contract. So I get why, the front offices are really, really tied, their hands are really tied. But in the case like the Knicks, you've got a lot of money, but it's just James Dolan. Dolan's just a moron. All he wants to do is just say, I own the Knicks, and that's it. Other teams like, but like if you go to Golden State, they're willing to pay that luxury tax penalty to get the best players that they can. Miami's another place, when they had Bosh Wade and LeBron, they were able to get Ray Allen on a veteran contract. They were able to get pieces in there. So it's possible to get a super team put together. It's possible for, a team to compete year in and year out. A lot of it is just this luxury tax. That's the reason why you don't see people out there spending. The Spurs are a really good example of that. They don't want to overspend on players, even though they pay players like, Gary Neal X number of dollars, and then he doesn't pan out or whatever. The Spurs are known for bad contracts. And I think because they were known for bad contracts, they don't want to really go out and spend like that. So I do get the front office sometimes saying, hey, we can't really do this because we just don't want to be in that luxury penalty area.
Well, and when you think about that too, like if you have a luxury tax, right, and you're not willing to spend that type of money, scared money don't make money. You already know, Rudy, you gamble all the time.
I want a Ferrari, but I'm not going to go buy one. I mean,
no. Well, for a Ferrari depreciates, right? But if I want to get a house and true. I want to, and if I have something that's valuable in front of me that's going to appreciate and not depreciate, and I have a valuable player that's going to appreciate my team rather than depreciate it, then I want to invest in that player. And I have a player, like let's say they, try to get somebody like Giannis, right? Or they try to merge the super team. That's a risk that they need to take. And when you get that money, when you get rings, it translates to dollars. Look at how the Spurs are not doing good right now. You don't see the seats being filled up. You don't see people coming to the games as much. This is before COVID. This is what I saw when I was at the games. People not coming in there. It's not translating to dollars. You have a small market. Nobody's going to buy the jerseys. Who wants a Brent Forbes jersey? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So if they're not willing to if they're not willing to invest and put that money in there and put the dollars behind their players, then don't be surprised when the team underperforms and then it doesn't translate into profitability from an organization standpoint.
Yeah, and I think also, one, it is important to bring players in, but if you are a quote unquote small market team, even if you are a big market team, you got to be able to draft well. And I'll say this much because I do a lot of scouting. I watch a lot of college basketball. I go to local high school basketball games here in the DFW area, try to keep up with the rising prospects in the area. One thing I will say is front offices and scouts on the national level, from major outlets to team scouts, they have got caught up in the hype surrounding this one word that I absolutely hate, and it's unicorn. Everybody's looking for this quote unquote unicorn. And so we're so ready to look at a kid who is 7 feet, who maybe he can dribble a little bit, maybe he shot a few threes, and people are ready to say, oh, this kid is the next big thing. Oh, this kid is the next big thing. But they're not looking at the reality of these prospects where, yes, they could shoot a three if they're open. Maybe they can dribble well in a video in an open gym. But they're really, at the end of the day, not a unicorn. They're not that. And we see a ton of big teams, or bad teams rather. They draft these players that are major prospects at major projects at like 3, 4, 5, with the hopes of them becoming this grand player, and it doesn't pan out. And a lot of times, like I know a lot of people who do scouting, they would tell you, no, that guy's not that good, or maybe that guy's good, but he's going to be a long project. He's not going to work out. We've seen it with guys like Dragan Bender, Darko Milicic. And even more recently, we've seen it with a guy like, maybe Anthony Bennett isn't fair, but we saw Anthony Bennett be taken number 1 because, 1, it was a weaker draft class, but 2, they went, oh, he's 6'10", he can kind of dribble, he can kind of shoot. But in reality, he really couldn't do most of those things, and he's out of the league within 3 years. So I think teams also have to be better internally with developing players and identifying the right players to develop, which brings me to my next question for everybody. This will probably be the last one for us, but we know LeBron James is a franchise player, and I think Jimmy Butler's kind of shown he can be a franchise player as well. But do the San Antonio Spurs, and this is where the Spurs are coming in, do the San Antonio Spurs have that guy on the roster, or do they potentially have them on the roster? I'll let y'all know what I think after I get answers from both of you.
Well, I think me and Rudy have a different opinion on this one. I personally feel like right now there is no face of the franchise. I don't know. I can't remember what Rudy's opinion is. We don't feel like there is a face of the franchise at the moment. Not that one that sticks out like the way that Tim Duncan did, like a sore thumb. Sure. I feel like this team is more of a team unit. There's nobody who really stands out, but they're all working as a collective to become a better team and potentially make it to the playoffs within the next few years. Who I project to be the standout player is Keldon Johnson, because he just has the whole package as far as marketability, just a good personality, aggressive on and off the court. I did think it was going to be Lonnie Walker for some time, but it just depends. I don't know. It's hard to tell. Derek White is a great, strong, solid player, but as somebody who stands out and is like the face, I don't think it's Derek White. So it's going to be interesting to see who's going to be the actual face of the franchise. What do you think, Rudy?
Yeah, at this point right now, I have, gone on my Keldon Johnson takes a lot and said he's the future face of the franchise. That's what I've been calling him on Twitter everywhere. But as of right now, there really isn't a face of the franchise, overall. I mean, DeJounte Murray, people had a bunch of expectations for him just because he made All-NBA second team on the defensive side. People thought, well, that's going to turn into something. It hasn't turned into anything. Derek White had a tremendous playoff series against the Denver Nuggets. Everybody thought this is going to be the next guy. Hasn't quite turned out like that as well. Lonnie Walker, I'm still not on the Lonnie Walker bandwagons yet, because it's not so much as inconsistencies. I just don't know if he's hit that wall. I mentioned it on one of the shows about him. Is this his ceiling? Has he reached his potential and his ceiling? I meant to more, I guess, say if he's hit a wall, which everyone think he probably has. I mean, we're not getting the Lonnie that everybody expected. I don't know if it's just he doesn't know how to slow down his motor when it comes on the court or what it is. But again, people thought he was the next guy. He's not the next guy.
I'm going to challenge you on that. I'm going to challenge you on that because I remember a lot of people had said that Lonnie Walker was a bust. So I feel like he actually exceeded everyone's expectations because he's done a lot better than what a lot of people projected him to be. They kept saying he was a bust and blah, blah, blah. I remember hearing that all over the place, but now I feel like he's exceeded those expectations and he's doing a good job. He makes small mistakes on the court and things like that. I know we're not talking about that. We're talking about if he's the face of the franchise. So I'm just gonna make that point. I think he exceeded people's expectations, but I don't think he's the face of the franchise, like you said.
Yeah, not yet. I mean, could he be? Maybe, but I think the guy that I like is obviously Keldon Johnson. Not so much for what he's doing around the community, because he's doing a tremendous job around the community. But I look at the way that he plays. He plays both ends of the ball, both ends of the court. He plays both sides of the ball. He's a great defender. He knows how to actually read. On the defensive side, he knows how to read what the other team is doing on offense. He can, get steals that within seconds. He can be at a perfect place to get a steal. His offensive game is still kind of raw, but it's raw in a good way, because he reminds me so much of Kawhi Leonard when he came into the league, how he had to develop the offensive game. He had it, but he didn't quite have all of it. So I'm seeing more, and I'm not saying he's going to be Kawhi Leonard, but I'm seeing more of a Kawhi Leonard type player coming out of here. The only difference is Keldon is not so reserved. So if he becomes that Kawhi Leonard type player that the Spurs lost by losing Kawhi, then everybody's going to feel like this is the man to build around. I think right now you got to build around Keldon Johnson. He's not a starter per se right now, but give him a couple of years. He spent his first year in Austin. He's going to probably be on the roster next year, guaranteed. He's going to get some minutes. I think this is the guy you kind of build around. DeMar DeRozan, I think, is coming back. So for right now, I'm saying DeMar is that face of the franchise just coming into next year. because of what he did in the bubble. He accepted a new role, and that's, hey, I have youth around me, so I'm gonna let this youth, emerge, and I'm gonna do my part. And we saw a much better DeMar DeRozan. So he's not on the roster quite yet, I would say, as far as face of the franchise or who's the face right now. If I had to pick one person, do you have a shotgun in my head who I have to pick right now? Not so much DeMar. I'm gonna tell you right now, I think it's Becky Hammon, is what it is, because I think if she gets that next step to giving the head coach for the Spurs, that is who your face of the franchise is, because that'll lead to so much more.
You so right. You are so right. If she gets the damn head coach job, she gonna be the face. Nobody better get her before the Spurs do. But but Noah, I'm gonna make this point before I give it back to you, Noah. Noah, I want to let you know that me and Rudy are not picking Keldon Johnson as a face of the franchise just because we interviewed him on our show, and we're not being biased.
That's totally fair. I watched it. I thought that was really cool. I think he's a great kid. And I hate calling him a kid because I'm really not much older than he is, but he's like a great dude. He, like you said, like y'all said, he is involved in the community. He on and off the court. He just seems like somebody who, just has that special something. But what I will say is, I don't think the San Antonio Spurs, and when I say franchise player, I'm talking about a guy like a LeBron, like a Jimmy Butler, who can be your best player on a finals team, potentially championship team. I don't think they have that guy on the roster. I really like Keldon Johnson. And I hear a lot of people say, well, he's the next Kawhi. Maybe he's not going to be like a clone of Kawhi, but here are a few things why I'm reserved about that is with Keldon Johnson, we got an 8-game sample size in the bubble. A lot of the teams that we played were sitting starters or they had injured players, and they also had the benefit, other teams, or rather Keldon had the benefit of playing his whole year in the G League, shot 25% from three in the G League. So the scouting report's going to say you can leave this guy open from three. He shot 65% from three in the bubble. That's not going to be something he can maintain. And teams are going to recognize, okay, well, he's not a guy who you can just leave open. So he's going to have to worry about that next year. And like Rudy said, he is a raw offensive prospect, though I think there are several signs that are really good for him. His free throw rate. So I don't know if y'all know what free throw rate is, but it basically is just how many free throws you take for every field goal attempt you take. His free throw rate is right on par with some of the top all-stars in the NBA. I have the stats in front of me right now. Out of every single all-star, he would rank 7th in free throw rate. And that's incredible. That's really good. That's a great sign, because if you can get yourself to the line, draw contact, and we know he embraces contact, you can be somebody who can get a bunch of points without having to take a bunch of shots. And I really like that for him. In terms of his handle, he really needs to work on that. He doesn't have a lot of advanced moves. He's more of a straight line driver. He really likes this hang dribble into a pull-up for mid-range, but his mid-range game isn't really there. He's a good standstill three-point shooter. I think it's obviously not going to be 60%, probably somewhere closer to 35, 38%, which is really good for, a forward wing kind of player. But I don't think the Spurs have that franchise guy on the team. And the only reason I say they don't is because I just don't see that thing that pops, right? You got guys like Zion Williamson, Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Jason Tatum, Ben Simmons, all those guys. They have shown, you can build a team around them potentially that can go far in the playoffs. We don't have anybody like that on the roster right now, and maybe they emerge in the next few years. But I think for the San Antonio Spurs, their best bet, and I love DeMar DeRozan. I like LaMarcus Aldridge, I suppose, for what he brings to the team. But I don't think those are guys. We know you can't build around them and be a championship. Right. We even saw this year, you can't even really build around them and be all that competitive. They almost got the 8th seed, but the 8th seed is not the goal. You're trying to win championships. You got guys who are going to be still expensive on whatever contract they're going to sign next. I think it's time to move on from DeMar. I think it's time to move on from LaMarcus Aldridge. And I say, hand the reins to the young guys. Let Keldon go. Not go like that. Like let him free.
I was like, what do you mean?
Let him go. Let Keldon play. Let DeJounte play. Let Derek play. Let Lonnie play. Let Luka play. Let Derek play. Let's see what they can do. If they are competitive and they get you in the playoffs, awesome. Now you have some young guys who are potentially worth keeping around. If they don't, you end up in the lottery. You have a chance at some really awesome players. I'll tell you, the 2021 and 2022 NBA draft classes are absolutely loaded. The 2022 draft class, because the NBA is talking about eliminating the one and done rule, not only will they have all the top players from the 2020 high school class, it'll have all the top players from the 2021 high school class, plus all the top international prospects. That is going to be a loaded class. I think if you're the Spurs, if you end up in the lottery in any of those classes, plus you have some young guys who may complement a good player, there are some players who I genuinely think are generational type talents in those classes. I think the Spurs should be looking forward, even if it means taking a step back and missing the playoffs, because I just don't think making the playoffs is going to cut it at this point. And you're hurting the development of young guys by forcing them to play limited minutes, by having them behind guys like Bryn Forbes or Marco Bellinelli or Rudy Gay. I just don't understand the mentality of forcing those guys to play heavy minutes when they no longer are as effective in those minutes. Now, maybe they are good somewhere else as complementary pieces, second, third best players on a playoff team, but I don't think you can build around DeMar or LaMarcus anymore. And I don't know y'all's opinion. I would love to hear it, but that's just how I feel.
I think the thing with the good thing with LaMarcus and DeMar is this is like their last year pretty much. So if DeMar opts in, I'm okay with him opting in this year because you do need a scorer. You need a consistent scorer. So I am totally cool with DeMar opting in, and then for whatever reason saying, okay, thank you for your time, thank you for your service. You can go wherever you want. LaMarcus is that one guy that I've been, really critical of, and I've been saying, okay, look, he doesn't fit the scheme. We don't want to do the 4 down anymore to where the power forward controls the ball, has to, gets in his post and all this other stuff. No, we lived through the Tim Duncan era, but those were the good years. It made sense to do that for Tim Duncan. LaMarcus Aldridge is not Tim Duncan. No. So we need to just move on from LaMarcus. It's his last year. A ton of teams want a big man on an expiring contract. They will take it on. A team like Boston, who I mentioned in another podcast, you can go into this draft and say, I've got the 11th pick and, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Boston has 3 first-round picks. Grab their 14th and their 26th, and, I mean, hell, shoot for the stars, get their 30th too. Who cares? Boston needs a big man down low like a LaMarcus Aldridge to help them get over that hump. They've got the perimeter secure with Walker, Tatum, and Brown. They need that one guy down below that they can count on to free up these guys to be able to become, open shots for them, basically. So it makes sense for something like that. LaMarcus gone, I totally agree with that. DeMar staying, I would rather have that just one more year if he decides to opt in. But you're right, man. Franchise players, 2021, if the Spurs come into the lottery, I love that draft class. You've got guys like Evan Mobley out of USC, Cade Cunningham, he's a point guard, shooting guard. You've got a ton of guys in this draft, not to mention the 2022 draft. So you and I are kind of like similar. I'm a lottery buff to where if my team is struggling, I want them to get these high draft picks to build and load up for the future. But it's San Antonio. We don't like to do that per se. We're so used and accustomed to winning. So it's not a good idea to like spread it around San Antonio.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
I don't have nothing of value to add to that. I think all y'all hit all the points and hit it right on the money. I agree with y'all 100%. I have nothing of value to add to that. I'm just kidding. But I think that I agree with you guys. They need to focus on the youth, build around the youth. DeMar, LaMarcus, their time is almost up. I feel like the criticism that LaMarcus Aldridge receives is rightfully so. So if he's ready to, if it's time for him to go, then go. My thing is, who would they get for LaMarcus Aldridge? Who would anybody get for LaMarcus, or who would the Spurs get for LaMarcus Aldridge? And that's kind of my big question that's in my head right now is who would the Spurs get in exchange for them? And would they be of value, or would they be somebody like, I feel like when DeMar DeRozan came to San Antonio with Jakob Poeltl, I feel like the Spurs lost that trade. People disagree with me on that, but I think that they lost because the Toronto Raptors ended up getting a ring, and they got Kawhi Leonard and they got Danny Green. And in exchange, the Spurs got DeMar DeRozan and they got Jakob Poeltl, and they haven't made a big splash here, and they haven't got the Spurs anywhere nearly as close to getting a ring. So I feel like they lost that trade. So I think it's time for them to build around the youth and just start rebuilding. I don't know. I have nothing of value to add.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think adding just players of value, and I think when we're thinking about who we can get back for LaMarcus, when I think of like the trade to Boston, you could potentially bring back Gordon Hayward. I think he's another guy you just have him on a rental. I wouldn't want to keep him around, but I want to aim for draft capital. If you can get multiple first round picks, 2020, 2021, 2022, you can end up packaging those picks to potentially move up higher in the draft. Or if you want somebody who, maybe is an elite superstar and a team says, well, I'll give you, XYZ for XYZ plus this pick. Now you have extra draft capital. I think that's what we saw the Boston Celtics do once upon a time a few years ago. And, in terms of, again, like the franchise player, is it Keldon? Is it Lonnie? I don't really think so. And I think Lonnie has, to some degree, gotten an unfair rap. I think we saw him spend almost all of his first year in the G League. Then the second year, people were ready for him to make that jump. I don't think he made as big a jump as people were hoping for. But by the bubble, we saw that he could be a secondary playmaker, somebody who could make some really, really incredible passes, whether it be touch passes, whether it be a hammer pass down the baseline, whether it be, like a no-look bounce pass. He made some really impressive strides, I think, as a playmaker, and he's a 40% three-point shooter. Those guys are valuable. If you can do that, you're valuable. I want to see where he goes after this. What is he going to do to add to his game this summer? And I've seen Keldon always in the gym. I think he's doing like 2-a-days right now, like early in the morning, late at night. We know Keldon's working, and I've seen Lonnie, post about going in the gym, but I know all players are going to the gym. I want to see what you're working on. I don't want you to work on a few different things to get a little bit better in every area. You should work on adding something substantial, tangible every offseason. That's how players get better. We see guys like, okay, we can use Jimmy Butler or Kawhi Leonard as examples. Now, those guys don't grow on trees. Not every 15th or 29th pick is going to become a superstar. But what we saw from those guys is every single offseason, they come back with a new new trick in their bag, to the point where now they're year 6, year 7, year 8. And there's not a lot of holes in their games left because they've been plugging those holes little by little. And that's what I want to see. If the Spurs aren't able to get a top tier guy in the draft, and obviously we know they're not a free agent destination, can they continue to develop their young players and help them come along? We've seen it with Tony. We've seen it with Manu. And to lesser degrees, we've seen it with guys like DeJounte, Derek, George Hill, DeJuan Blair, Tiago Splitter. We've seen them take guys who are late picks and make them valuable. And that's what I want to see from the Spurs if they're not able to get a top pick. Now, my bet is, get to the lottery, get a top pick. But if you can't, again, just try to make the best of what you've got. Because
you know what? I agree with you. I want to see what they're doing in the gym too. I feel like that's really important. I want somebody to post on social media like they do with Alvin Kamara. And I want to see you with one leg on a balance ball and juggling some stuff. What are you working on? Show us.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to see what they're doing. Like, I know everybody's in the gym. Let's see what you're doing. Yeah. Thank you. Thank y'all so much. If y'all have anything else y'all want to like promote, or anything to say, where they can find you, whether it be your writing, your podcast, your radio show, anything, shout out anything y'all want to shout out. And I really appreciate having y'all on here. I really appreciate it.
You go first, Rudy.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having us, Noah. It was a blast. I love doing stuff like this, especially with you. I know I've been on a podcast with you recently, and it's been fun as always. And yeah, social media, I mean, on Twitter, it's at Sweep the League, really easy, going off the Cobra Kai Netflix thing going on right now. So Sweep the League, it's at Sweep the League on Twitter. Instagram, it's at Campos.Rudy Jr. Facebook, obviously Rudy Campos Jr. You can find us Sports Dime on Facebook as well. Just search the sports golly, the Sports Dime. I'm all confused right now. Outside of that, we've got good stuff coming up. We've had some great interviews on the radio show. Keldon Johnson, Joy Taylor, we've got a bunch more coming up as well. There's just so much stuff in store for us. Listen to us every Sunday, 10 to 11 on 9:30 a.m. The Answer. We broadcast on Twitter, Facebook. I'm going to pass it over to the popular one of the group, Miss Carolina Teague.
So thank you so much for Noah for inviting me and Rudy on. I really appreciate it. I think this is the first time we've ever done a podcast together. So I hope you enjoy what you heard and you invite me back. That would be lovely, for you to do that, just so we can, start. I don't know, just like having more podcasts together. I feel like that would be great. So you can find me on social media, on Instagram and Twitter at Carolina Teague _. And I also do some writing from time to time when I'm motivated to write. I write for sportsastoldbyagirl.com. And also, of course, I have the show with Rudy, who is on this call as well. It's called The Sports Time. It's from 10 to 11 a.m. on 9:30 a.m. The Answer. And I do want to mention that our show is a fun show and it's for the listeners. So if whoever's listening, if you guys want to tune in, we would love for you guys to tune in. We're very highly interactive with our listeners. We love to take their calls. We're doing sports horror stories for the month of October. So you get to call in and tell your favorite horror story. And we also have had some amazing guests on, and we are hoping that we're blessed enough to have more guests on in the future, just to make sure that, anybody who listens has a good time. So we're really working hard behind the scenes to make sure that gets done. So we hope that you guys enjoy what we bring to the table, and you guys, listen to us, and we want to make it the best hour of your weekend. So, I really appreciate you for having us on to get our voice out there. And I think that was long-winded enough, Noah. I think I'm done.
Hey, thank y'all so much again for coming on. I love having guests. Y'all are absolute superstars. I love listening to y'all's show, and then the podcast that comes out as, after the show. Again, love everything y'all do. Y'all are awesome. Thanks for hopping on, and hopefully we can do this again sometime soon.
Yeah, whenever.
Anytime. Yeah, hit us up. And we ain't no dang superstars. You know what I'm saying? We got to get back to work.
Another huge shout out to Rudy Campos Jr. and Carolina Teague for joining me today. I had an absolute blast talking NBA Finals and Spurs basketball with them, and y'all will have an absolute blast checking out their exclusive Keldon Johnson interview, which I put a link in the description below. We have some more awesome guests on the way and some more great content in the works. So as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. What did you like? What did you not like? I'm always trying to improve for y'all. And most importantly, turn on the notifications if you want to see when the new videos are going to drop. And I'll see y'all next time, Spurs fans.